Hi everyone. In this video we are going to learn about the second part of the skeletal system, which is the appendicular skeleton. So in the axial skeleton we had learned that axial skeleton, it is composed of all the bones which form on the single axis of our body. The appendicular skeleton, we will see the lateral bones which are present surrounding the main axis of our body, and it mainly consists of two parts, the limbs and the girdles. So first we will talk about the limbs. In the limbs, we see that they are again of two types, the forelimbs and the hind limbs. So first have a look at the forelimbs. The forelimbs, it is formed of 60 bones altogether. And when we look at its structure, we see that the forelimbs, it is formed of topmost bones of our arm, which is called as humerus. Next to humerus are two bones which are called radius and ulna. Next to it seen are carpals, which are the wrist bones, and these wrist bones, they are 8 in number. Now, next we see the palm bones, which are called the metacarpals, and finally the finger bones, which are called the phalanges. So the correct order is humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals and phalanges. Now moving forward, let's have a closer look at the humerus. So when we look at the humerus, we see that it is made up of few parts, out of which the first part is called the head region. And this head region, it articulates in the cavity which is formed by the backbone, which is called as the scapula. So scapula, it has a cavity-like structure which is called as the glenoid cavity. And in that glenoid cavity, the head of the humerus, it articulates to form the shoulder joint. Next is the deltoid ridge. So this deltoid ridge, it is a kind of elevation, a rough elevation, and here the deltoid muscles are attached. Next to it is a coronoid fossa. The coronoid fossa, it gets articulated with the coronoid process of the ulna when the elbow is fixed. So the ulna, it gets fixed in the coronoid fossa when the arm is fixed. Next to it is the olecranon fossa. The olecranon fossa, it again gets fixed with the ulna when the elbow is in motion or the elbow is stretched. So the coronoid process will get fixed with the coronoid fossa. Similarly, the olecranon process gets fixed into the olecranon fossa. So this is the structure of humerus, which on one end gets attached with the cavity of scapula and the other end gets attached with the radius and ulna. So the next two bones are the radius and ulna. We see that the radius head, it gets articulated with the humerus. Similarly, its head also gets articulated with the ulna to form radio-ulnar joint. Now coming to the ulna, we see that it has two processes. The first process is called as the coronoid process and the second process is called as olecranon process. As we have learnt this coronoid and olecranon process, they get articulated in the coronoid and olecranon fossa of the humerus. So this was about the radius and ulna. Moving forward, let's have a closer look at the carpals. So now looking at the carpals, we see that these carpals are the wrist bones and they are arranged in two rows. The first row or the proximal row consists of the number of bones which are called scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum and pisiform. The second layer, the distal layer, it is formed again of 4 bones, and these are trapezium, trapezoid, capitate and hamate. So what we have seen? We have seen that the carpals consist of 8 bones which are arranged in 2 rows, the proximal and the distal. Next with the carpals are the metacarpals. Metacarpals are 5 in number, and these metacarpals, they are arranged medially to laterally. Last is the phalanges. So phalanges are the digits that we see. There are 3 phalanges for each bones and 2 for the thumb. So they are total 14 in number. So this was about the bones of 4 limbs. Next, let's have a look at the bones of hind limbs. The hind limbs consist of 60 bones, in which 30 bones are present in each limb. When we look at the bones distribution here, we first see that the first bone of hind limb is the femur, also called as the thigh bone. Next to it is the patella, also called as the knee bone. Next to this are tibia and fibula. After tibia and fibula is the ankle bone, which we call as the tarsals. Then comes the metatarsals, and finally the digits, which we call as phalanges. So now let's have a closer look at the first bone, which is the femur. When we look at the femur, we see that its head articulates in the cavity which is called as acetabulum, which is found in the pelvic girdle of our body. So in the pelvic girdle, in this cavity, this femur, its head gets attached and it forms ball and socket joint, and this joint is what we call as thigh joint. Now coming next, we see that there are some trochanters present, greater and lesser trochanters. They are kind of a rough elevation which are found, and to these trochanters the muscles get attached. Next to it, we see that there are some condyles present. These condyles are medial and lateral. These condyles help in the formation of joints. Next to the femur, if we see, there is a small triangular bone which we call as patella. Patella, as I have just said, it is the knee bone. It is small and this is a sesamoid bone. Next to the patella, we see that there are 2 important bones of our body, which are tibia and fibula. Talking about the tibia, we see that on its head there are 2 condyles present. These 2 condyles are medial and lateral. These are mainly responsible for the articulation with the condyles of the femur. So all these together form the knee joint. Next to it, when we talk about the fibula, we see the upper end, it forms the lateral condyle and it gets articulated with the tibia, and its lower end, it gets fused with tibia to form tibia-fibula joint. So these are the tibia-fibula bones. Lastly, we will have a look at tarsals, metatarsals and phalanges now. Observing carefully, we see that tarsals, they are 7 in number and they are also arranged in 2 rows. Now looking at the proximal row, we see that the first bone is talus, now second is navicular, and the last is the calcaneum. The calcaneum, it forms the part that we see as the heel. So this is the calcaneum. Next, when we talk about the distal row, we see that the first 3 bones are formed of first, second and third cuneiform and 1 cuboid. So they are total 7 in number. It is very important to understand that the tarsals are much stronger than the carpals because these tarsals they have to support the entire body weight. This is why the tarsals are much stronger. Next to tarsals, we see the metatarsals, which are 5 in number. Next to metatarsals are the phalanges. Now, like the phalanges are present in hand, similarly, the toes are also composed of phalanges. The largest toe, it is composed of 2 phalanges. The rest all are composed of 3. So this was about the bones of hind limb, wherein we see that there are 1 femur, 1 patella, 1 tibia, 1 fibula. Next to it are 7 tarsals, then 5 metatarsals and 14 phalanges. So this was all about the limbs. Moving forward, let's have a look at the 2 types of girdles. So let's have a look at the pectoral girdle. The pectoral girdle, it is found in the upper half of our body and it is composed mainly of 4 bones. Now each pectoral girdle, it is composed of 2 bones and these are scapula and clavicle. Now when we look at the scapula, we see that it mainly has 3 processes which are spinous, acromion and coracoid. Besides that, you see that there is a spine-like structure also present. So all these are mainly related with the attachment of the muscles. Next to it, we see that the scapula also has a cavity-like structure which we call the glenoid cavity. As we have learnt earlier, the humerus, the head of the humerus, it gets fit into this glenoid cavity to form a ball and socket joint which we also call as shoulder joint. Next, when you have a look at the clavicle, it is a thin bone. It is also called as collarbone or beauty bone as well. Next, when we see that this clavicle has mainly 2 ends, the medial end and the lateral end. The medial end of the clavicle, it gets articulated with clavicular notch of manubrium in the sternum. So one end of the clavicle, it gets attached with the sternum and the other end, which is the lateral end, it gets articulated with acromion process of the scapula. So this is how the clavicle is present as the collarbone. This was about the pectoral girdle, in which we have seen that the scapula and clavicle become together to form this girdle which help in the support of the upper body parts. Next, have a look at the pelvic girdle. So this pelvic girdle, it is found in the lower half of our body, mainly in the waist region, and this composed of 2 bones. The pelvic girdle can also be called as innominate, and this innominate, it is mainly composed of 2 hip bones. Now these hip bones, let's say each of them, it is composed by the fusion of the 3 different types of bones which are called as ilium, ischium and pubis. Now by the fusion of these 3 bones, there is a formation of a cavity which we call as acetabulum. In this cavity of acetabulum, the head of the femur accommodates to form a ball and socket joint called as thigh joint. So the thigh joint, it is formed by the cavity which is the glenoid cavity and the head of the femur. Next, we see that the 2 halves of the pelvic girdles join together. Their joining point is called as pubic symphysis. So these are the 2 girdles which are found in our body which help in the support in the upper and the lower half of our body. So we have learnt about the appendicular skeleton, in which we have seen the various types of bones which are found in the limbs as well as in the girdles. So the thigh joint, it is formed by the cavity which is the glenoid cavity and the head of the femur. Next, we see that the 2 halves of the pelvic girdles join together. Their joining point is called as pubic symphysis. So these are the two girdles which are found in our body, which help in the support in the upper and the lower half of our body. So we have learnt about the appendicular skeleton, in which we have seen the various types of bones which are found in the limbs as well as in the girdles. Hope this video was useful. Make sure to like, subscribe and click the bell icon so you are notified when another video is uploaded. Thank you.